from the place where East meets West, from the bicameral fissure of the global mind, from the Eastern Bloc to American rock. Welcome to At This Moment on freedomslips.com.
Ba-dum-bum-bum. Hello, everyone. I'm Angela Black. Welcome to the show At This Moment, every Thursday night here at 10 p.m. Eastern / 7 p.m. Pacific, or in whichever time zone on the globe that you exist. And it's a fun ride. We are here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the number one 100% listener-supported radio station on the planet and possibly beyond. So if you are entering a colony on Mars, tune in. You can do it. It's okay. And the way to keep this truth boat floating, of course, is to find the donate button at the chat room. And if you haven't visited chat yet, well, by all means, please join our chat. It's so much fun. I've met some of my best friends in the chat room. I kid you not. And what else? Also the site support button at the top of the homepage. And if you're listening out there through TuneIn, iTunes, TalkStream Live, Shoutcast, however you're finding us tonight, we do encourage you to visit the homepage at some point. And so some of the one of the best $5 investments on the planet is, of course, the subscription to the archives, because we do have two studios going simultaneously here all the time, which I guess would be redundant. Studios A and B. And you cannot possibly listen to both studios A and B with one ear in each studio and do that all day long, all week long, and have a life. It's just impossible. So the way to solve that problem is a mere $5 a month, and you can have access to the archives within one day. So I highly recommend it, because sometimes you're listening to one show and you're just like, wow, I wish I would have caught that other show. Well, bing, your problems are solved. Also, the seed packs are still available, although we are entering summer. So I would encourage you to get them now. If you live in a warmer climate, you can grow things whenever the heck you want. But so the seed packs exist for a $60 donation. You get 2 billion seeds. No, I'm kidding. And then for the $100 donation, I know it is 35,000 seeds. And for the $200 donation, it's a community garden seed pack. And everything is non-GMO, non-hybrid. So please do find yourself, feeding yourself, growing your own food. So important. And by the way, tomatoes don't actually grow in Walmart. They don't. So you might want to grow your own tomatoes. And by the way, they are fresh and tasty when you get them from Nighthawk, because, again, non-GMO, non-hybrid, super yummy, etc.com. All right. So without further ado, I'm looking forward to the next 2 hours as I've just met this individual, this fine young man. And it should be an interesting ride. So I hope you're all ready to go. Get your seatbelts on. Everyone, welcome to the show from the ArcLight Institute, the one, the only, Michael Rosecliff, a.k.a. Mike. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for joining me in my lowly show. I know that you're doing a high-profile radio like John B. Wells this morning, from what I hear.
No, we had an intense show this morning, but like I said, if you wait long enough, the further into the evening I go, the more the caffeine kicks in, the faster I talk, which is why I think they booked me so early in the morning for Wells' show.
Well, you're on, because I've been accused of the same thing, so it'll be fun. And occasionally what I do with the audience, by the way, is I tell everyone, let's take a deep breath. So I'm going to do it right now. Everyone breathe in and out. It always helps. It calms me down for 3 seconds. So anyway, I didn't mean to order you around, but yeah, thanks for slumming it with me.
Hardly. Nah, this will be fun.
Yeah, it's going to be great. I just met you, and already I'm enjoying you immensely. We actually had a conversation with the individual who introduced us. Ken Keeling was on a call just now, and he's hilarious. So thank you, Ken, for booking for making this show happen tonight, and for all you do. Very, very happy to know you, man. So anyway, okay, you are Michael Rosecliff, and you have developed a financial software that basically accurately, with a 90% rate, predicts global currency trends. Am I in the ballpark?
Yeah, I mean it's a little more than that. I mean, I tend to focus on the economics of things, as I like to say.
Okay.
Simply out of my own passion for economics. I mean, I have a background in economics. I did work on Wall Street for about 2 years. They were right. I was too smart to make it there, and they were 100% correct there. But nonetheless, I mean, all manner of, from geopolitics to socioeconomic trends, social trends, but I tend to, I guess, publicly speak most about economics just out of just my own sheer fascination.
I see. Okay, so you started to develop this software, but there was Mike walking through the day, and it was pre 9/11, right? I mean, is that kind of where the origin-ish of when you started to develop the software?
Shortly thereafter.
Mm-hmm.
Shortly thereafter. Hang on a second. I got Ken here telling me that the microphone's too low. So let me see what I could do about that. We got real-time feedback here. It's a wonderful thing.
Funny. Now, see, I hear you fine, but I also got a message from a friend of mine that our connection was a bit iffy. So I hear you fine, and I
think Ken just told me to start yelling. Is really what it came down.
You sound fine to me. So I don't know. I'm not getting any I don't have any problems. Maybe it's just that my mic's kind of hot. So, okay. Well, we'll just roll with it. I think we're fine. I'm going to wait for some more word to see if I think we're fine.
I think we're good. I was going to say, in terms of the timeline that led up to the whole development of Looking Glass, it's actually right after 9/11.
Uh-huh.
And I've always, for the most part, been a big fan of alternative news, just because I'm a naturally kind of curious individual. And it really, what inspired me to really look into the plausibility and the possibility of Looking Glass had really not a lot to do with the events of 9/11, despite, living in New York at the time. It had more to do with a statement I heard from a brilliant guy by the name of Stephen Hawking.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he would be a brilliant guy.
Yeah, and he just in my passings and in my travels, I forget what show I was listening to. It was just one of those things that you just kind of heard out of the corner of your ear. It was on a mainstream corporate media. I was honest, it was television, and I hear this phrase, and now this is the kind of stuff like people shouldn't say to me, because it'll, as I've joked around before, I said it'll make me stand in the kitchen in the middle of the night and eat a box of Oreo cookies while staring at the microwave clock and just let my mind wander a little bit. And I hear the phrase.
I'm there. I'm in the kitchen with you.
Yep, and I hear the phrase. At some point in time, and this is, I want to say 2002, 2003. At some point in the not too distant future, at that time, the collective computing power, processors, mobile devices, PCs, laptops, whatever you want, all kind of will add up to the collective processing power of one human brain. And I was like, oh boy, this is gonna be a microwave clock and an Oreo cookie night. That's for sure. And so it was. And I got to thinking, and I arrived at another question, which is how I knew I was on the right track right away. I arrived at another question. I said, well, is there then a line between brain and mind? Where does that line exist in the grander scheme of what would be conventionally described as computer processing power? So. I said, well, if there is a certain sentience in the wire, or if there is enough information simply published or content in written format online, or in this, the Internet of Things has been the buzzword of 2015 is the Internet of Things. I said, could there then be kind of a collective picture painted of perhaps what's really going on in the world? And let's take that a little bit further and say, could, based upon content available, based upon just the sheer volume of information passing in near real time, could a portrait of future events be painted? Mm-hmm. A digital version of Nostradamus, if you will. And I was like, you know what? I wonder if it could be done. And at the time I was working in luxury asset sales, on the finance side, and that was from 2002, 2003 to about 2008, 2009. And I'm not going to say which ones, but they float. They're really big, and they depreciate in value 50% about 10 seconds after you buy one. All right.
That's what I saw when you were describing this. It's exactly where I was. I was already on the floating thing.
Yep. I sold big, expensive floating things, and apparently, as I so often joke, but there is truth in every joke, I said apparently 200% financing an asset that depreciates 50% in value the first 10 seconds you own it, including negative equity, turns out that's a fiscally irresponsible decision. So I had a pretty good front row seat of the bubble from '02 through the mortgage bubble, and I was involved on the F&I side, and all the while, I'm not.
Is that you?
I have no idea where that's coming from.
Oh, it might be. I can just hear it very, very faintly. So I don't know. I think it's on your end. I can barely hear it. It might be like a link that you opened or something. I'm not sure. Wow, and you were flowing, man. I'm right there.
That was really bizarre because I only had a couple browser windows open.
Oh, it happens. It happens to me. It drives me nuts, and I'm like, oh, is that voices in my head? What the heck? So anyway, okay, you were saying F&I, which, by the way, what does that stand for?
Finance and insurance.
Thank you.
It's usually the part of the sale process of either a car or a boat or, whatever, where people just kind of grit their teeth and they just kind of, no! But yeah, I got a good front row seat of what happens. During an asset bubble, during a mortgage crisis. And I was very aware of economics leading into that just because it was something that I always found entertaining and kind of intriguing to me to study. So I kind of saw this bubble, and I went, like this is not going to be good. And I saw the kind of the aftermath of that. And all the while, again, being a tech guy, I was actually the kind of director of internet sales for the majority of the East Coast for a establishment that we will not mention. And long story short, I got a real nice picture or a real nice front row seat to what I consider to be the little one in terms of economic crises.
Okay, the little one.
Oh yeah. Shortly after that, I went to work on Wall Street because after the Dow drops 7,000 points, I was like, well, let's get it on the ground floor.
Yeah.
And I did. And, it was kind of a funny running joke, but I got for those that are familiar with the FINRA, NASD license tests and everything, I wound up getting like a 96 or something on the Series 7. And I'll never forget the guy that owned the brokerage I worked for was just like, you're not going to make it here. You're too smart. 2 years later, he was right. And I did freelance IT from there on out, and it was like, all the while working on Looking Glass. And about a year and a half ago, just as a hobby developer, I kind of stumbled upon something. I went, wait a minute, I think I just won. I think I did it. And I kind of had it in a test phase for a little bit. And sure enough, the accuracy went from like 70%, and then it started looking like 80%, then it started looking like 85%. Then once it went past 90%, I was like, I kind of really built something here. This is pretty cool. And
those are phenomenal numbers. That's a phenomenal percentage. I can't even imagine how. So you developed it. You're talking about your developing of the software, yes?
Yeah.
Okay. And so you find it's that accurate and that effective, and you just must have been like dancing through the daisies at this point. Just so stoked that it works. Yes.
Not quite. It was more like intellectual vindication, a short end zone dance, and then back to work.
Uh-huh.
But it was really, I was kind of in awe a little bit when I started to see like the 90% numbers. And the first thing that came to my mind was like, all right, I got to get a verifiable track record going. Otherwise, like I said, if I walk up to me in the middle of the street, and I was like, hey, I have a program. It's 96% accurate. And, the first thing I would have said was like, are you out of your mind?
I hear you.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I was on mute. I was.
So I was like, well, how could I do this? My original purpose of building the software is very simple. Corporations, finance, consultation, and that was it. And I said, you know what? I have an idea. Some of the information, especially on a socioeconomic or geopolitical, and even on a financial, certainly on a financial level, I was like, that's like, need to know information. If I can quote Bert from Tremors. I was like, that's need to know information. So I was like, I can do two really good things here. I can share what has proven to be, a really accurate series of short-term, mid-term, and, the long-term stuff and the really abstract stuff that Looking Glass finds. It's like, well, it's hard to be proven right on stuff that didn't happen yet. But in terms of like a lot of the short-term to mid-term, especially the geopolitical stuff, guys that follow me on Twitter have just seen a really awesome, and I have to say I'm proud of what I built. This is not bloviating. I've just seen a really, really accurate narration of what's going on in the world.
And what is your
so
Twitter?
Far.
What's your Twitter?
At ArcLight, ARCLIGHT, INST. At ArcLight. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, Institute. Okay,
yep.
I got it. So ArcLight Inst at
yep.
ArcLight Inst. It's ARCLIGHTINST. I'm gonna check you out there for sure. I gotta watch your Twitter feed for sure.
Yeah, there's like the guys that follow me on Twitter. I stare at the screen all day doing my thing. They're the guys that keep me laughing, and I have some really fun Twitter followers and a lot of running jokes on there and everything. So I have to say I'm thankful I did the alternative radio thing, and I said this on John's show this morning. I said I'm really thankful I did the alt news thing. I said I know I made a bunch of people laugh, if nothing else. I said I hope I've shared some relevant info, but ultimately what I designed Looking Glass for is, as much of a PR stunt as it might sound, I designed Looking Glass for corporations and for what I call fair corporate use, business consultation. I am, amazingly enough, a capitalist. So that was, that was kind of the original design, but leading up until what I'm kind of doing now is transitioning away from the whole, doing the professional radio guest and the publications and everything, which I've had a tremendously great time doing. I'm kind of transitioning away. People ask me, they go, well, with software like this, don't you want to be rich and famous? And I say, no, I want to be neither rich nor famous. I want to be wealthy and obscure. There's a difference.
Yeah, you're here. I love wealthy and obscure. Much better. Yeah, famous is no fun because, I had the opportunity to become rich and famous and mostly the fame was what scared me. And looking at what happens to people in fame today, it's so awful. I wouldn't wish it upon my worst enemy. I really wouldn't. Well, maybe my worst.
I mean, I have absolutely zero desire to do mainstream, news and television. A lot of people told me I had a face for radio. Little did they know how right they were. Yes, don't we all? It's wonderful. But yeah, I mean, to go on like, mainstream like CNBC type stuff. I mean, could I do it? Yes, theoretically I could if I wanted to. How long am I going to last there? It's like, yeah, I give myself about 2 hours before they're like, we got to get rid of this guy. So, so the reality of the situation though is, I mean, what I built in terms of, the software system and everything, as far as I know, it's the only one on the planet even anywhere close to, the level of accuracy that,
and it's called Looking Glass for everyone who's listening. It's called the Looking Glass software or technology, right?
I just call it the Looking Glass system. And
okay.
Yeah, I mean, we're working on version 3.0 right now. Kind of, everybody asks, well, what happened to V2.0? It's like, well, greatness skips a generation. So apparently, there's a lot of the changes that we made are so dramatic. I said, well, let's call it, Looking Glass V 3.0. So, I've started the construction of that now. And one of the reasons as I mentioned on John's show earlier is I don't sound like a lot of the other voices in alternative news radio. And the reason is I am not a save the bees, save the whales, save the snails kind of let's all join hands and sing Kumbaya kind of guy. I built this software implicitly, for corporate use. And so I had a viable, means in which to be an economics or a business consultant. And, so for lack of a more polite way of putting it, a lot of times some of the stuff that comes out of my mouth, I'll say it on the air live. People are like, what? And that's okay. That's what I'm here for, is to I don't tell people what to think. I just tell them that it's okay to think.
Yes. Yes.
And that's hopefully my delivery style has been, unique, shall we say, and it's only because I'm having fun doing what I'm doing, but the point of the story.
I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt. So this is one of your last shows, and the reason that you are no longer going to, frequent alternative news radio is because,
I honestly had no intentions of really doing alt news in the first place. It just seemed like a very logical way to do some real good. At the very least, save maybe some investors some money. So, let people know what's going on. Say, hey, listen, this is what the system sees. I don't like, not so much the attention. That's why one of the reasons I don't show my face. It's not because I'm shy. It's, hey, listen, this is what I built. It's the only one like it. It has tremendous value, and that's all there is to it. I did my part. And the reason I'm moving away now from alternative news, being a professional guest is because right now I'm thankful I have enough liquidity. I can trade on my own. I can use the software. So if people are thinking like, hey, this is a PR stunt or something like that, it certainly isn't. If it was, I would just keep, selling the publications and so on and so forth. But the reason I'm moving away from it is so I can focus more on development of the software.
Version 3.0.
Version 3.0, which gives me, I like to tinker and, do the programming. It really is quite enjoyable. But simplicity really is another thing. And rather than having to manage subscriptions and doing all that kind of stuff, I could have one or two corporate clients and maybe get a little bit more involved in a project long term.
Mm-hmm.
That's amongst other reasons. And, as I like to say, hey, I did my part. My job is done here.
Now this system, the Looking Glass system that you developed, which V 1.0 is still available and 3.0 is coming out soon. I asked you earlier, and I would love for you to just elaborate on this. So it's not for sale, for instance. I mean, people can't buy the software.
No.
Right.
No.
And would you like to just tell people why? I was very interested because I thought, wow, maybe I'll buy this, and apparently that's not possible.
Sorry, folks. It's not available on store shelves, nor will it ever be. You can't go to Pirate Bay and download it. It's not going to work. So, the reality of the situation, it's a one-off program. And one thing that I've learned throughout, studying history, a big study of history, is I look at like Nikola Tesla. You don't want to sell off that one invention that really can make you.
Mm-hmm.
So I lease time on it. There are some topics that I research. There are others that I simply do not. I've gotten all sorts of different questions where it's just like I reserve the right, and I said it's all about fair corporate usage. I mean, if there's an individual, an investor for portfolio analysis that says, hey, can you take a look at what I'm doing here and give me a portfolio analysis, I charge by the hour, depending upon the types of searches that are required. So it's a very custom piece of software. It's not like you just open up a window and it's like, oh, there it is.
I see.
It doesn't work like that. I promise you. So, in terms of selling the software, it would be an act of insanity, shall we say.
Okay, so then when somebody leases time with your software, you are directly involved with their portfolios and or their investment strategies, that type of thing. Are you directly working with them and each person that leases time with Looking Glass?
Yeah, I do, and
I
enjoy.
Cool.
Yeah, it's fun. I enjoy the interaction. I've met some really, really cool people. Both as customers and again, people on Twitter and everything. I've had a ton of fun. And like I said, I've gotten questions from the mild to the wild, in terms of, hey, can you research this with Looking Glass? And, I'm just as entertained as they are sometimes when I see the results because it's like, oh, wow, that explains. And then you can connect it to one or two other storylines and all of a sudden like, oh, that's what's really going on in the world. Okay, fantastic. So in terms of, again, to answer your question, selling the software, it's like, no, I mean, if you want to know why I'm not going to do that, like you could look at, the guys that were early on in Microsoft that sold their share in, the original Windows GUI or the original Macintosh GUI. It's like, when you build something like this, rich is you sell the software, wealthy is you retain rights to it.
Mm-hmm. So smart, of course. Yes. Okay. So, all right. So I just said so like 6 times. Okay. I'm just trying to grasp all this because obviously, as I told V, a friend of yours, by the way, V, the guerrilla economist who you spoke with earlier, he was on my show a few weeks ago. And by the way, he's a phenomenal brain, and I guess you guys are cronies of sorts, which makes sense. And
a loose affiliation.
Okay, and he's actually on your website with an accolade. So that's pretty cool. What was my point? Okay. So Looking Glass determines future trends and also decodes things of large scale events financially that happened in the past. Am I close? Am I there?
You're not too far off there.
Okay. Because I'm kind of curious as to, some type of accidental decoding of a big event or something that was, that changed the path of economics, and when you found that, because I was reading, your main page on the arclightinstitute.com, by the way, everyone. It's THARCLIGHT institute.wordpress.com. I don't even know if you need the WordPress in there, but. And so, yeah, you were predicting trends for the future and with a 90% accuracy rate, and you were also able to decode things that happened in the past. So would you elaborate on something that, you went, wow, look at that, and there it was, something that happened from the past?
I think some of the it's more about the future. I mean, the decoding past events, theoretically. We've had some pretty good success with that, but it's more the forward-looking stuff that's been very impressive. I mean, I think at this point, especially those that have listened to V's show from months ago when I was on there, I had shared stuff about the BRICS nations, which for those that aren't familiar, BRICS, Brazil, India, China, South Africa, and Russia.
Russia, yeah.
Okay, and that's not in that order, but the there's about 105 other nations that are also, or 110, I think at this point, more so now, that are part of the BRICS nations, that are basically the premise of what they're doing is they've chosen to completely circumvent the U.S. dollar for, amongst other things, oil trading. For those that are familiar with the petrodollar, if country A wants to sell country B a barrel of oil, they have to both convert their currency into dollars, i.e. the petrodollar, and, the bank takes a little bit of a vig, and that's how the world bankers make their money. But one of the biggest things that we saw early on, and I have to say V was probably even a little earlier than I was before I really started doing the research, was to go, wow, these nations are gaining strength. That's a game changer on the economic landscape, and it affects so many different segments of domestic economics. And one of the cool things about talking to V, amongst others, has been we've been able to really look at it from an investor standpoint, and rather than do the traditional or typical, sometimes not of everybody, but typical thing of going on an alt news program, going, the bankers are evil and they're all bad and this, that, and the other thing. We were like, okay. Here's what's going on. How do we have the average investor have that level of insight that the big time investor has? And that was kind of our approach to what we're doing, and certainly my approach to what I'm doing. But one of the biggest things that we predicted was the fact that the BRICS nations were going to gain strength. We were months, or actually I was months ahead on saying, I said, watch this. I said, Vladimir Putin, president of Russia, I go, watch it. At some point in time, I said, he's going to announce the intentions of a unified Eurasian trade zone currency 4 months after Looking Glass gathered the necessary information for me to be confident and go, yep, that's probably going to happen. Sure enough, the announcement was made right around the same time the Asian Infrastructure Bank, started to really gain traction and really become a force to be reckoned with in economics. And these are all things that V and I especially spoke about very early on and openly on the air. And I mean, those that follow me on Twitter, they've seen, me literally from day to day go like, watch, this is the next move. And it happens. This is the next move and it happens. So what I think we're seeing economically, so to speak, at the moment is I think the first intentions, as far as I can tell, the first intentions of the whole BRICS thing was to provide a second side to a carefully orchestrated World War III type scenario. Mm-hmm. All right. And because, you look at economically where we're at now, we're probably pretty close to 1927, 1928, circa the Depression era. And, there is going to be that economic reset. How do you avert something like an economic reset? Is, if your economy is built in a bubble, well, you try to spark a war.
Yeah.
That's how we got out of World War. That's how we got out of the Depression. Any kid that tells you FDR's New Deal is what got us out of the Depression is sadly mistaken. It was World War II. So,
very profitable.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and I think what we've seen at this point now is I think the BRICS nations have become far more powerful than those that kind of created them, intended, for Vlad to be this boogeyman bad guy, the easily hateable face of, those Russians again, that kind of thing, Cold War V 2.0. It seems that he's able to move now with relative impunity. In Europe, especially on their playing field, the banking playing field. He's able to move with impunity, which means the BRICS nations ostensibly are able to move with impunity. And for those that are investing, and those that are trading the market, and those that are involved in economics, or those that are just concerned about the geopolitical state of the planet, that is monumental. And it's just horribly underreported, in mainstream media. Mm-hmm. And for those that live, eat, and sleep and breathe economics every day, you have to kind of look at what's going on there and just go, what a game changer. Wow. The Anglo-Western banking system is getting beaten at its own game by ostensibly one guy, Putin. And, I look at that and I just go, that has nothing to do with, my level of national pride or patriotism or anything like that. I'm just looking at a brilliant business guy I'm like, wow, look what's going on there. And for those that, even if you're not involved in economics, if you have US dollars in your pocket, the chances of, wrap your imagination, or really not your imagination, wrap your mind around the fact that how do you think the United States would react, or, the population of the United States would react to a global currency reset? Wake up in the morning, the dollar in your pocket is worthless. And we've gotten previews of that in Baltimore and in Ferguson. I said, wait till there's a real reason to be pissed.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Mm-hmm. That's intense. So this was announced last week, actually. I think Monday this week, that Vladimir Putin ratified an accord on Saturday, I think, to set up $100 billion reserve fund for BRICS, basically, and it is the answer to it's the opposition to the International Monetary Fund, the IMF. So it is a game changer, and the AIIB also. I'm a novice when it comes to all of this stuff, but I am paying attention to people like yourself, people like V, and reading what I can that is coming out there. So I do believe that within, say, maybe the next 18 months, we are going to wake up and find that dollar to be relatively useless. And that's what I'm grasping. And if I'm way off, please correct me. But that seems to be the trend of information that I'm getting from credible sources like yourself, like V, and just in general from people who know.
Yeah, a lot of times you'll hear it. Occasionally, even I'll do this, but I'll try to compare. Matter of fact, ironically enough, I just did it on the show. You look at 1929, mm-hmm. The Depression era. Okay, that, like so many other speculative bubbles, okay, was exactly that. It was a speculative bubble. Yes, the market lost, over 50% of its value, mm-hmm. In 1929, but the currency that was underlying that market, you could, your dollar was still worth something. That was pre-Federal, that was pre-Securities Act of 1934. Okay, so you still had, I believe at that time, a metals-backed currency.
Yeah, the gold standard of sorts.
Gold standard. And at that point, and people go, well, if the market implodes, it'll be like 1929. It'll be like the Depression. And my answer to that is, no. 1929 was not a currency implosion. 1929 was a speculative implosion, and the parallel so often drawn in various economics classes, from high school to PhD or MBA level, is the tulip bulbs in Amsterdam. What happens when there's tulip mania? What happens when there's a speculation and the hype starts to feed the hype that starts to feed the hype, and you get this completely unfounded, level of speculative. I don't want to use the word inflation because it's not the right word, but this completely unfounded rise in values. I said, but that's one thing. A currency reset is far more sinister than that. A currency reset is, especially in the speed of information world that we live in now, and the interconnectivity and just the way society has evolved with the ever so thin fabric of society. Mm-hmm. The reality of the situation is the United States has not experienced a currency reset per se. In order to see that, you have to look at places like Weimar Republic, Zimbabwe, mm-hmm. and one of the coolest things. I told us that I don't typically speak much about my personal life, but one of the two coolest gifts that I've been given by my customers is I have a customer that happens to live in Germany and sends me a series of Reichsmarks from 1914 all the way up to like the 50s, and it tells the story of the Reichsmark and the inflation that Germany experienced post World War, after World War I through World War II and so forth. And I had another running joke with a very cool customer of mine, and he goes, I sent him, a couple of the EAMs to take a look at. And I said, the next one's not free. And he goes, I'll pay $50 trillion for it. I said, okay. He sends me a $50 trillion Zimbabwe banknote. And those tell the story of what happens during either a currency hyperinflation event or a currency reset. I think they're two cool things to have, hanging up on the wall, because if anybody ever walks into an office and says, well, that stuff really doesn't happen, all I have to do is just point at the wall and go, oh, yeah, it does.
Right.
And it happens in first world industrialized nations, too. So.
Just to clarify, so EAM, you clarified you clarified this for me before the show today, but it means emergency action message, and it's a military term. Is that correct?
It is a reference to people that have either study military history or who have seen the movie Crimson Tide will know where that comes from. It's the EAM, emergency action message, and that's kind of if you watch the movie Crimson Tide, it's they're all standing around waiting for the message to, are we going to launch the nukes or not? And I kind of copied the format a little bit just because I am a big fan of military history. I am, especially aviation, but I was like, what creative but easy format can I use? And it was partially not that I'm a lazy person, but I was like, to do these long reports, I was like, what's an easy formatting kind of thing that I can go with? And the old fashioned typewriter font and, the telex font and everything, I was like, that's pretty cool. So, which is kind of a reflection of some of my interest there.
I see. Okay. And so to elaborate a little further about what people aren't ready for, V had told me, he had used this term, and I think it's exactly what you're referring to, is paper millionaires. People who have, paper, and they just have no idea that, when the S hits the fan, that basically their money's going to be worthless. And at that point, if they have not planned, maybe say, relocation seems to be a big issue, et cetera. But yeah, that's the thing, is because of what you described, the scenario that you described basically is pointing to the paper millionaire as not being anywhere near as safe as they think they are. Yeah. How's that for an analogy?
You'd be surprised. I mean, in terms of, if you know what's going on and you can understand what you're seeing in terms of economics, I don't discourage people at all from trading the market. I'm not the guy that's saying take all your money out of the bank and hide it under the mattress, by any capacity. But at the same time, understand also that we are not in a market that's trading on any sort of economic fundamentals. And John and I had that conversation this morning. Mm-hmm. You have to understand now, it's not trading the market based upon, I used the Japanese candlesticking technique. I used the Fibonacci retracements. You have to almost trade the market and think like, what would most people do? And kind of follow that narrative a little bit. And that's where the Looking Glass software is just really good at gathering that kind of data and keeping at least me and those that subscribe to the stuff a little bit ahead of the curve. In terms of a paper millionaire, mm-hmm. Technically, I mean, we can say there are paper millionaires and paper billionaires out there. In terms of their liquidity and their assets being safe for now, yeah, absolutely, they are. I have often said, and I've said this before, gold and silver is an investment. Everything else is a trade. If you hold futures contracts on metals, guess what? You're still holding a piece of paper. If you hold an ETF, an exchange-traded fund, or an ETN that's predicated on underlying metals, guess what? You're still holding a paper investment. Short of good delivery metals, okay? That's everything else is a trade. So what I've been telling people to do at this point is you look through history at some of the wealthiest families in the United States and in Europe, especially in Europe, but United States for the last 200 years. It's these exact types of time periods of outrageous movement. Because you have to remember, in order to generate wealth on a grand scale, you have to have volatility in a market. If the market just flatlines, it's no good. You really can't generate wealth. I said, but the secret to this market is really it's taking paper investments, currencies or whatever, turning it into more paper through, a pragmatic investment and trading in the market. And I don't want to use the word invest, but trading the market to then turn into metals. And then the thing is, sit back and wait. Because there's two magic words in what we're seeing here. Now, do I believe some of what we're seeing is carefully orchestrated to transfer wealth? Yeah, I do. Absolutely I do. Because you have to think about it. What's an ounce of gold going to be worth after the dollar is worth, let's say, 20% of what it's worth, 10% of what it's worth right now, 0% of what it's worth? What's the purchasing power going to be? So now if I know that's coming, mm-hmm. What am I going to do? I'm going to pile up metals is what I'm going to do. I'm going to buy metals and I'm going to have good delivery metals on hand because I know that I'm going to use one of my favorite cars, which is a Lamborghini Countach. If right now that car sells in good condition for $90,000 at a private sale or an auction, Well, if I just get all my metals together and get my gold together, I can just wait for the dollar to implode. And for those that remember those, the famous pictures on Wall Street of the guy selling the Rolls Royce at the time for like $100, and it was like a $5,000 car. My purchasing power with metals dramatically increases. So then I can go out and do what some of the wealthiest families in Europe and around the world have done, which is buy up cash flow positive assets. And I use a car just as a kind of a silly example, but buy up cash flow positive assets, because guess what? It's an economic cycle. All of a sudden, whatever's next happens, and look what they went out and bought for pennies on the dollar. It's transferring ownership, okay, from the bottom 80% to the top 20%. Let's say round numbers. That's what we're seeing here. And I would love to tell you that I invented that brilliant investment strategy, but I certainly did not. It's been going on for thousands of years. So that's really kind of what we're seeing. And that's why I kind of label gold and silver as real investments. The purchasing power of metals and other desirable assets, even, petroleum products as something to back a currency, something that's in demand, finite, and requires industrial input to mine or drill for, whatever the case may be. Those that have those desirable things, because you got to realize we still have a generation in this country that's old enough to remember. Mm-hmm. Not many of them left, but we have a generation, that's old enough to remember a gold standard or, a silver certificate and stuff. So, people, they say, well, you think whatever's, coming next is going to be metals backed? I mean, I said, it has to be. Mm-hmm. To restore that level of willingness, I don't call it trust, but, or faith, but that willingness to engage in transactionary business with any sort of financial institution. I said, there's going to have to be that, and there's going to be a lot of changes made. I said one of the biggest things we're going to see is the simplification of investments. These quadruple leveraged, here's one for you, student loans.
Okay.
Student loans. Sallie Mae student loans. When I read about this, and it's been going on for some time, but I did a little research on it. Sallie Mae student loans are being sold right now as fixed income securities.
Okay.
Interest-bearing, no different than a bond. Interest-bearing fixed income securities. Let's take a look at the level of unemployment in the United States. Let's take a look at the average wage in the United States. Let's look at the size of the average student loan bill in the United States, and let's scratch our head, and you don't need looking glass for this. What are the chances those are ever going to get paid back? Zero. So in addition to a mortgage bubble, in addition to a commercial mortgage bubble, which I haven't even gotten into yet, now we have the student loan bubble. Those types of investments are going away after this reset, and we're going to have to return to some sort of fundamentally sane level of economics. The paper millionaires at this point, I said the ones that are smart enough to know exactly what's going on, they're safe. It's the ones that don't know what's going on that are going to have the problem. I consider myself fortunate enough that I've lived through 2008, and I saw hey, happy times are here again. Oh, what the hell happened? Mm-hmm. So this is really, I go into what I'm doing now, not only with the software, but the life experience and the insight to be able to go, all right, we got a limited time here. It's a limited time offer, so to speak. And then there's going to be that reset. And the object of the game is to be out of the way of the social events in the United States amongst other Western nations. And maybe some BRICS nations too. We don't know. But the effects of a global currency reset are going to be, how shall I put this delicately and non-melodramatic, cataclysmic.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So on your website, you also have, so it's the Looking Glass version 1.0. It's 7 emergency action message editions plus the metals investing guide. So you are there to advise people on investing in metals. And what you've just said to me, what I'm grasping is that, buy these metals when you can buy them at a low rate, and what was the term you used? Hold on. The cash flow positive. Is that right? Is that what?
Yeah, the term I use is cash flow positive assets. And just to give you a really simple example, because I think it sheds a lot of light on what's going on. The cash flow positive assets. Let's say hypothetically speaking, I had, $20 million worth of gold floating around somewhere, right? And I wait for this global currency reset or this global economic reset to happen. Now, I can go out and I can buy non-cash flow generating assets, a car, a boat, assuming it's not commercial, but, a luxury asset or whatever the case may be. Or I can create, remember we talked about the difference between rich and wealthy. I said I can create wealth. And how do I do that? Well, I can go out and I can buy distressed factories. Railroads.
Okay.
I'm using kind of a 1920s example there, but, railroads and factories and ranches and real estate, things that after the recovery are still going to be generating cash flow adjusted for whatever the new system is. And now, surprise, surprise, how do you think a lot of the wealthiest families in the United States made their money?
The industrial manufacturing of things? Yes. Please tell me I'm right.
And purchasing and purchasing the requisite assets in order to do so at fire sale prices.
Right.
And if you know what's coming and you know what's going on, this is possibly, from my generation at my early 30s, from my generation, this is possibly one of the greatest wealth creating opportunities you can imagine. Okay? If you know what's going on. If you think, what's going on is going to last forever, you're sorely mistaken. But to be even close, and I said, well, let's say I'm not right to the dollar, to the day in terms of, I've kind of seen from Looking Glass data, one of the most important questions I get is, okay, so when's it going to happen? Mm-hmm. Third quarter, fourth quarter of 2016 looks to be kind of, and I'm not the only one saying it.
V said the same thing.
Yep, Q3, Q4 2016, because there's a nasty little thing floating around out there that's kind of inevitable at this point. And if you're expecting any compassion from me on the subject, I mean, if you listen to Wells' show this morning, I proudly announced that I said I'm thankful to have been born with minimal emotion, if any, because it allows me to arbitrarily translate the Looking Glass data. I said, but the Q3, Q4 2016, there's a little something in the United States that's never been seen before. Okay, you've seen it in other countries, and you've gotten previews of it. Greece, Spain, Portugal at one point. I'm trying to think of other ones. Athens, that was Greece. Italy. They're called austerity measures.
Okay, right.
Okay.
I'm sitting here taking notes like you can't even imagine. It's probably why I'm not talking a lot. Okay, go on, please.
I would have been an economics professor, but from what I understand, on most college campuses, it is not considered acceptable for the professor to have a bottle of Russian Standard on the lectern with an ashtray that's smoking. Which really kind of makes me smile and think of like Walter Cronkite. I was like, he was able to go on the air and smoke a cigarette in live television. Like, why can't I do that in a lecture hall? But nonetheless, in terms of what we're seeing now, economically, like I said, it really is a fantastic opportunity and getting back to the austerity measures thing, I almost lost my train of thought there. Getting back to the austerity measures, we haven't seen those in the United States.
Right.
Okay. There's, this notion, if you read about stuff like Cloward Pivot, the idea of, creating a government where people become so dependent upon the government that eventually there's an implosion. And then there's no choice but to reinstate socialism or instill socialism and martial law and all that fun stuff, right? It seems to me, by my observation, and of course, with a little bit of Looking Glass data too, it seems like Cloward Pivot V2 or Plan B seems to be what's been selected, and it's kind of more sinister when you think about it. But let's say Q3, Q4 2016 rolls around, the dollar collapses. What's the first thing the United States is going to do? They're going to say, well, there go the welfare programs. There go the EBT cards. There goes all the government housing programs and stuff like that. Take a look at Baltimore and take a look at Missouri, okay, and other cities, like even Katrina during the hurricane. I'm sorry, even New Orleans during the hurricane. Mm-hmm. Okay, those are previews. I consider those like movie trailers of just how thin the fabric of society really is. I said, now you turn those cards off. A lot of times, and this is, again, here comes my cynicism, so brace yourself.
Okay. I'm holding on.
Hold on. That's what I usually recommend to people. So here's what, the reality of the situation is as such. For those that are floating around out there thinking like, and it's big in alt news. You know, they're going to release a super virus. It's going to be a pathogen. It's going to wipe out 80% of the United States. There's going to be this mystery virus. I mean, theoretically, could a black swan event like that happen? Yeah. You know, absolutely. The reality of the situation, though, is population control, which goes right back to the economics of we have a culture in the United States at this point. It's not a welfare problem. It's a welfare culture. In order to sustain an economy long term, okay, there's, you know, for what it's worth, and I'm going to put this in the most delicate form that I can, you know, Cloward Piven v 2.0 is implode the dollar and stand back. As the population control method is not going to be, you know, a super virus or something like that. It's people with guns.
Yeah, and 9 meals to anarchy. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at my generation. I mean, I'll be the first to tell you, I'm a big video gamer. I love video games. I really do. Have a lot of fun with them. But I called not really my generation, but the generation younger than mine. It's like Generation Kill. There's just this desensitization to violence. You know, there's a certain desensitization to, and I'm not, you know, like, you know, parents are blaming the video games. It's a constant bombardment from all, you know, various media outlets of this kind of like, you know, kill them all, let God sort them out kind of mentality, which I've been accused of every once in a while of kind of supporting. But the reality of the situation is there is going to be that purge. And I mean, you look at like Jade Helm. One of the most popular questions I've gotten recently, it's all over the place in the alt news community, is Jade Helm, they're coming door to door and they're going to take your guns. They're coming door to door and they're going to, you know, there's going to be martial law in the streets and all that. I kind of look and go, well, first of all, let's say hypothetically I'm the military, right? And I want to conduct super duper top secret urban martial law type drills, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not going to do that under the cover of broad daylight in downtown Los Angeles. There are places that are very secret that, you know, military has access to, that if they wanted to train in secret, they very easily could. Downtown Los Angeles in an MH-60 Blackhawk is not exactly what we call subtle. All right. And that's designed to do the same thing that I think a lot of the gun legislation is doing. And that's to make people that own guns buy more ammo and people that don't own guns go out and buy guns. Why? There's your population control method right there. You know, you implode $1, an economic implosion. Okay. You will see a side of society that I don't think really any of us wants to see.
Yeah. Wow. You know, I'm seeing it and it's, it sounds like a really, really intense horror movie, but there it is. It's reality. It's a possible reality. It's actually a probable reality. So you know, you just took me to an area that I think I pondered it in my brain somewhere, but you laid it out pretty, what's the word I'm looking for? Explicitly. You know, so in other words, maybe not drop the super virus. Maybe basically, you know, encourage people to buy more ammo, more guns, and then implode the dollar and make everyone, nervous, hungry, and food is unavailable. It really is about food and water. And when somebody's hungry and, there's their neighbor who's got a stockpile and I've got a gun or, you know, Joe Schmo has a gun, bam, people are going to start to get angry when they're hungry. And the next thing you know is people are killing people, and it'll become commonplace. Is kind of the nightmare scenario that you're describing.
Yeah, I mean, like I said,
you're so touchy-feely, Mike. You're just so sweet and warm and fuzzy.
I try.
Sorry.
But by the way, this is my compassionate side. But you know, as I said, I used to have emotion at one point in my life, but fortunately, I had it surgically removed. No, but the reality is, I mean, if you look at what's going on now. And again, like I said, the Jade Helm thing made me smile. It's like gun legislation. I'm a big fan of the Second Amendment. I really am. Mm-hmm. But you look, you know, and you look and you see, let me see, you know, every couple of weeks it's, oh, now you can't have a 30-round mag for your AR or AR variant or your AK or your AK variant. You can only get a 10-round magazine. So what does that do? That makes, you know, everybody run out and buy 30-round magazines, you know, 7.62 by 3.9, you know, Soviet block ammunition for your AK. It's going up in price. Go out and buy more ammunition. And it's this narrative like gun legislation right now. If I wanted to, anybody could walk out or sit online and purchase an AR-15 with all the bells and whistles and the toys that would be comparable to anything most Western Bloc special forces would be able to own. That's a true fact. All right. So all the gun legislation and all they're coming for your guns. Oh, they're going to come. No, they're not. No, they're not. Okay? The gun legislation, for the most part, I'm not saying there aren't certain pieces of legislation that have limited, various elements of the firearms community, but the reality is 90% of the time it's a big front page story. It convinces people to go out and buy more firearms, and then, leading up to what? What's the end game? And the end game is, you put austerity measures in place. Don't be in the United States. That's all I got to say. I mean, as much fun as it seems to live in a bunker and live off of canned beans for, a year and never see the light of day.
Yeah, we're at the break. We've got about 4 minutes, maybe 5 at the very most. So please take a break. And everyone, Mike Rosecliff will be with me for the next hour here at This Moment Revolution Radio.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.